and welcome back to Dr. Schuster and Oxley, The Power of Stories, our podcast series. Delighted today to be sharing the platform here with Trisha Conley, a long-time friend, collaborator, work colleague, confidant, whatever. There are many, many words that we'll use to describe Trisha throughout this next 30 minutes. Just to remind you, the podcast series is really built on the idea that stories have such a powerful and understated role in how we go about telling ourselves what professional life is about and actually learning lessons. So each podcast will focus on someone's story or a story that has meaning, and then we'll talk about why it has meaning and the different dimensions to it. A feature of these podcasts is to have a guest when we can, and we're absolutely delighted today to be joined by Trisha Conley. I've known Trisha for 20 years. I figured this out the other day. I was going over it and looking back and saying, 20 years, can you believe that? I don't know where that time has gone. But Trisha is, if she can close her ears for one moment, is one of my favorite people. She grew up and her early existence was in the Midwest, Iowa. I was trying to think of her career. She did an interview for our second book, A Groundhog Career, and we talked about it. And I was looking back over the notes of the story, trying to pick out certain themes that I thought were somewhat defining. But on a professional level, this idea of being an achiever, of striving, of constantly sort of battling to move forward, to constantly be in motion. And I think for many, at least in the way that I've worked with Trisha, that's always been something of a defining feature, this sense of always trying to be stepping forward and moving into the future. She started her career at Mutual of Omaha, and I loved the story she told me about how did she come to join HR. And she said, well, I didn't so much join HR as I saw something that wasn't happening, and I just sort of kicked the door in and did it. I just did the HR work because no one else was doing it. And true to her fashion, not only did she kick the door down and do it, she did it better than anyone else. And so this has been something that I think she's built on time and time again. Whenever someone tells Trisha it can't be done or it's not conventional, she just proves them wrong. And I mean, what's not to like about that particular trait in someone that you work with? She and I have worked together in Chicago, in London, in Mumbai, I was trying to think in Houston as well, I think. And so I'm not sure whether it's me following her around the world or her following me around the world, but we do seem to find ourselves in the same locations an awful lot. And finally, just in terms of a few personal things, one of the things that I was reflecting on was what are the sort of defining characteristics from my perspective? And I kind of go, there's this sense of being committed to getting things done and never, ever failing to get them done. There's something about that trait with Trisha, about that sense of if it needs to get done, I'll get it done and it will be done. I don't know how to describe that as just sort of stick-to-itness or something like that. It was just a resilience, very grounded. I mean, there's something about Trisha where every situation we've been in, no matter how much it's been a crisis situation, it's just kind of grounded and things seemed to de-escalate. Whatever the emotion of the moment is, it just seems to sort of just slowly de-escalate. I love that. Just a little bit competitive, maybe. Just if I'm competitive, Trisha might be slightly more competitive, but also at the same time very collaborative. I mean, this is an interesting thing. We think of competitive people sometimes as being hard to work with, and that's not certainly the case with Trisha. Very funny. I wrote down here a great sense of humor, and perhaps that's what binds all three of us together. And then finally, very family orientated. I mean, that's something that I think has been central to her existence. And the day after Mother's Day, it seems apt to end on that note and wish you a happy Mother's Day. Helmut, anything you would like to add?
Well, David, I had a list of things I wanted to say, but after that, there's nothing really left but one thing. Yeah, I agree with everything David said. And I do believe, Trisha, I've known you for longer than David. Because I think you joined BP in 2001. And so I met you very early on. You probably don't remember me, but I heard a lot about Trisha. Whenever there was a succession planning round, the word Trisha, the name Trisha was always around. But there's one thing, in our career, Trisha, which I really, really liked very much. In a British polite culture, Trisha was one of the very few people who spoke her mind. Direct, clear, respectful. You didn't have to dig and dig and dig. You had a conversation with Trish. It was honest, straightforward, and I respected you that much. Yeah. But other than being very bright, trim, and by the way, I'm not quite sure whether David is less ambitious than you were. I would give you like both 10 out of 10. Yeah. So there's no question about that. But what I really like, what I think most people did not see, this HR profession that was deeply thoughtful, reflecting, sometimes probably overthinking things. Yeah? And I think this is the other Trisha, which I think I found so appealing, because there was the Trisha who got things done, but there was also the Trisha, very reflective, very deep thinking, and I think we both loved that so much. Yeah? And we're so proud of you that you finally...
Sorry, I like the sound effects.
You finally got... Yes, you do. We will do it for you as well at one point in time, David. No, but Trisha, we are so proud of you that you finally achieved the standing, the number one job in a company, because this was actually well earned. Yeah, so well done.
Okay, I like toys. Trisha, over to you. Any rebuttal?
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you to both of you. It's kind of fun to hear other people talk about you and just kind of bask in it. So thank you. I can't disagree with most of what you said. I am super competitive, and perhaps my story will get into that a little bit. I think it's the other end of what happened, but yeah, I think I identify myself as first a mom. Yeah, being Mother's Day yesterday. It's top of mind. I get to see one of my two kids tomorrow, so I'm super excited about that. My husband John, and of course I'm in the middle of three kids, so I'm a sibling as well, and yeah, just really happy. I couldn't wish for anything more than where I'm at right now in life. It's everything I dreamed and more, but as you guys say, I'm super ambitious and thinking about kind of what's next after this. I've hit the role that I wanted, but now I'm thinking about what happens after I retire, and hopefully board seats and things like that. So I'm not done yet. I've got more to do.
Yeah. I mean, career advice series of books, perhaps.
Maybe. Who knows?
It's a very, very rarefied space. So Trisha, we centered these podcasts.
To interrupt you, why do you talk about retirement? I really believe it should not be on your agenda right now. Definitely not.
I will tell you, I have 5 years to work, and I'm very focused on that because of my husband's age, and we are going to spend as much time as we can together, because God willing, we're still on this earth and everyone's healthy, but he's 19 years older than me, and so therefore when he hits 70, it kind of you kind of go, oh my, how much time do we have left? And so we took a trip around the world in October. It was something we planned for 20 years, and it's one of the bucket list items I wanted to do. And so I'm going to retire at 58, and then not really retire, but stop working full time, and I'm going to go do other stuff.
It's reinvention.
It's reinventing. I would agree with that.
Helmet and I have this thing about trying to ban the word retirement, because it potentially has
reimagination,
connotation.
I like that better. I'm reinventing myself in 5 years. How's that?
So the podcast series is about stories, and so this might be a good way to segue into the story. And I think you've chosen a story that has stayed with you. It's a sort of sense of inspiration for you. Perhaps wasn't terribly pleasant at the time, but certainly has created meaning for you. And I suppose we're intrigued to understand perhaps why you chose that particular story. So maybe start off with when you were confronted with the question, hey, would you do a podcast, and we're thinking about centering it in on a story. How did you go about selecting this one?
Well, I've got to tell you, David, when you first approached me and didn't give me a theme, I was kind of like, oh my gosh, where do you start? Because if you think about it, our whole life is one story after another. And so how do you pick one out that is important to me, but also could be relatable to people that take the time to listen to the podcast. And it's ironic that I had my epiphany at 11:30 last night, and I thought that's what I'm going to talk about. But it is definitely a story that's been in my life a long time, and I go back to it a lot because it was one of those things that I don't care where it's come up in my life. It leads back to I think the element of the story is who I am as a person. So I don't know. It just seemed relevant and poignant, and one that I wanted to share today.
Well, thank you for that.
Okay.
Can we invite you to go ahead and share the story, and then we can perhaps discuss it?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm going to go all the way back to my childhood when I started junior high school, and I always wanted to drive. So it's how long can I get till I get to 16 and actually get my license and drive? And I grew up in a middle class family. There wasn't a ton of money, but we didn't think we were poor. So it was just kind of you lived with what you had, and I was always brought up with you work for money, and so I knew at a very young age I had to get a job. So I detasseled corn when I was 14. That was my first job before I really could actually legally work. That's what the kids do in the farm field. You go pull corn. And I started saving money because at the age of 12, I really wanted a car. And I knew they cost a lot of money. And my dad made me a bet. He said, if you can get straight A's from 6th grade, so that's about when I was 12, all the way through high school, I'll buy you any car you want. And I thought, okay, I still have to have a backup plan, so I'm going to work and have some extra money. But that was kind of my goal, was he's going to buy me a car. I didn't know if he could afford it or not. That wasn't the point. It was the fact that he put that challenge out there. And as you've already said, I'm very ambitious, and I was going to go after it till I got it. I even had the car picked out. It was a 1989 Z28 IROC blue Camaro. Now, that was a cool car back when I was a kid. That was the car I wanted. And so I started working at school. It was super easy for me. I didn't try very hard. I was very active in sports. So I was playing basketball, softball. So school was something you did until you could play basketball or softball in the evenings. And it was very easy for me. I didn't have to study and got through my classes pretty easily. Was getting good grades and was kind of called on a lot by the teachers as someone who was going to go far. And so I thought, well, this is a cakewalk. I can do this and get my car and make some money and go to school, because you go to college. That was a given. So fast forward 6 years, and I get to my senior year in high school. I'm 18, college exams, entrance exams, doing everything I can to get prepared. And I took the dreaded physics class, which I had zero interest in. I didn't want to be a STEM major, and probably didn't study as hard as I should have. And I was getting down to the final, this was April, May of my senior year. And it was looking like a B. And I thought, man, I got to pull out an A or else that car is gone. And I started negotiating with my dad. I'm like, what happens if I get a B on the final and I bring home a B plus? And he's like, no car. I said, after 6 years of trying, you're gonna take the car? He said, what was our agreement? It was you had to get straight A's. So of course, get to the final exam. I even tried to negotiate with the teacher, and knowing that I really had earned a B plus, pushed for an A minus. Grades came out as a B plus, and my grade point average went from a stellar perfect 4.0 to a 3.92 for the final class. And I was devastated. And I remember going home. I was crying, upset. My mother was pleading with my father, and he's like, "The deal's a deal. You don't get the car." And now, forget the fact that I got a full ride scholarship to pay for all of my tuition to college, but that was irrelevant. The car was gone. And so I ended up in an $800 beater with no floor. In fact, we put a stop sign in the bottom of the car in order to have a place for your feet. It was like the Flintstones cars. You remember those back in the day? It literally had rusted out. It was so old. And so I went from this dream of a brand new car to driving a stick shift Chevy Chevette for all of college. And so that was a really hard lesson, but I can tell you to this day, I mean, my dad and I still joke about the car. And I think about myself now as a parent, I probably would give in to my kid. I really think I probably would. But my dad stood firm, and it's it's still in my mind. It's a driver for me. Not fulfilling what you were going after and not getting the rewards of not hitting that goal. So that's
an extraordinary story, isn't it? Yeah.
Trisha found this story really extraordinary and resonates very, very much with me because I had a very ambitious father as well. And basically, I was pretty much probably a very good student as you were. But when I came home and I had an A or like 97 or whatever I had, the first thing he would do, not basically say, well done, son, he would say, what is Michael? Michael was my best friend. He was also a very good student. What did Michael get on the exam? It was the most annoying thing ever. Whatever it did, it was not enough to be good. You had to be best. So very much resonate your story. Very much resonates.
Tough
David.
love.
So, Trisha, the story, I think, is on its surface this story of an incentive, the idea of giving someone an incentive, and we do this all the time in human resources in a different context, but it's a similar thing, right? You deliver a certain business outcome and you'll get a bonus. But this idea of using an incentive, but actually at a formative time in your life when, all of the research talks about how we as human beings develop that sort of empathy or the idea of that, the third emotion, the super ego is developing in our minds, the idea of guilt and shame and conscious and all of these things that as kids we're, somewhat disorientated by all of these things going around. So how did it affect you? At one level, you didn't get the car, but at another level, it created something else. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So in that sense, how do you think the story? Well, it wasn't so much a story; it actually happened to you, right? So this is real life. So how did it impact you?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think now it's so much easier to look back and go, oh, that's why I do what I do today. And I do think you mentioned being grounded. I do think rather than wallow in it, I was like, okay, how do you move on, right? How do you pivot to what's next? And it was, okay, that means you got to work in college. You got to work part-time and get a job so you can pay for the stuff that you were, that car didn't last. As you can imagine, that 800 car died and I had to get something better for college. I had to come up with plan B and I ended up having to work and I wasn't planning on working through college. I had my tuition paid for, but I still had to pay for room and board, and my parents didn't believe in paying for college. That's just how they were raised. They had to pay for their own college, and their view was, parents, that's your job. So I had to get out student loans, I had to work, and my parents supported me applying for them, but there was no credit card given to me like my roommate had. My roommate had a credit card. I met her at college, and she had Dad's credit card, and I thought, wow, that's an interesting concept. It would have never even dawned on me that my parents would hand me a credit card for school. So I got a job. I mean, I think I just pivoted to how do you move forward? There was no looking back, right? The car was gone, and there was no debating it. And so I ended up having to get a job. I worked part-time on campus. I'd get up at 5 a.m. and I would bake 1,000 cookies before the day started. That was the job I could get that fit in with my schedule, and you just move forward. And I think to this day I get up at 4:30 in the morning. There's something about those habits and routines that start very early in your life that now I'm not making cookies anymore, but that's when I work out, or that's when I walk, and I start my day early. So I do think those formative years created sense of routine, sense of purpose, and just moving forward. I'm not a wallower. I'm not a complainer. I just problem solve and move forward, which is probably, I can thank my dad for bits of that, I think.
Trisha,
So go ahead.
No, Trisha, you said a few minutes ago, you don't know what you would do if you had the same situation with your own children, and you kind of indicated you probably would have given the car anyway. Yeah? So question really is your father right, or is your attitude right? Yeah? Who do you think is right, or if there's simply no right or wrong? So what's your take on that?
Yeah, what a great question. How much? And to this day I don't know, because in some ways I don't know that he could have bought it. I think he thought it was always a pipe dream, and I'd never achieve it. A little bit, not that he didn't have faith in me, but it was such a long commitment ahead that I think he would have had to think about. Wow, gosh, how do I go procure this? Because I don't think at the time we probably had the money. So I think it was out of necessity that he was standing firm. But I mean, we have a great relationship today, and that's not the dad he is today. He's not like that, right? He's not rigid, and even today, I'm sure he remembers that story differently. It's funny how we remember it versus probably how it actually played out. But that's how I remember it happening, and I'm sure he doesn't probably even remember the bet. It wouldn't surprise me, because for him it's what you do as a parent. I think today, and maybe because I'm blessed with a better position and I can give my kids more, that's probably why I feel like, because I had to work so hard for myself, I don't want to watch my kids work as hard. Is that a bad thing? Maybe. It may impact work ethic down the road, but gosh, it's that old adage of you want to give your kids everything that you didn't have. And I think I'm living that out, good or bad. So I don't know. We'll see. If my kids end up successful, then maybe I did right. If my kids end up depending on me, then maybe I did wrong. I don't know that I'll know until I see them at my age.
You can strip the story down a few different ways. One of the things I was listening to was saying, okay, there's how it impacted you and the sort of consequences of it. There's the fortitude of your father, who may or may not have been as conscious about how deeply it impacted you. And then I suppose there's this general thing. Is it possible that we go through sort of not having a not a trivial view, but we do things and we don't necessarily overthink them, but they have a profound impact on someone, right? I mean, I suppose in a way that's based on what you were saying. That's sort of, I draw that out a little bit, either as parents or in the business world. Those chance interactions that you have where you say one thing but you could just as easily have said something else potentially. But they somehow have a profound impact because they've reached someone at a particularly vulnerable point in their careers. So is there a parallel, I suppose, from the story? In a way, that's why we're having these conversations about stories, to professional life, and how sometimes the most profound and valuable things that happen to us are the things that don't happen. The absence of something, the missing of something. And so, I mean, how do you relate to that?
It makes me jump immediately to, again, more stories, right? And so even the two of you, I can think of instances where you guys have said something to me that had a profound impact on me, but I promise you, neither of you probably remember it. Likewise, I think about that every day. I've had people at work come back to me and say, do you remember what you said to me? And of course you'd think, gosh, in the midst of all the meetings you have, no, if it wasn't relevant to me, it was just something I said in the moment. When they tell you how much it impacted their life, you go, wow, I need to be thoughtful about my words. And it was positive. And I think, gosh, I wish I could bottle that and remember when I positively impacted somebody's life and you don't even know you did it. And so I think it's, how do you tell people when they do that to you, right? So I think go back and tell people when they make an impact. And likewise, before you speak, think about it. How's this going to impact somebody? Because I know I am super direct, but I actually do that intentionally. But you want it to land well, right? Even if it's tough news or if it's good news, you still want it to land the way you intend it to land.
So, can I ask you,
is it?
Okay, go ahead.
I don't know if we were going to ask the same question, but I mean, it just, sorry, it's a thread you have to pick up on. So clearly we had presumably very negative impacts on you, since you didn't tell us that you thought that what we had said had been very valuable. I do think this thread, though, is so powerful, how chance meetings and interactions have profound impacts on people. And is it about what you say, or is it just about where that person is in that moment? And there have been occasions where failure feels so devastating. I working for a promotion that just didn't come, someone promising one thing but not delivering it. A sense that your career is all about one thing and then discovering actually maybe it's not. But in the process of making that adjustment in your mind, it feels quite devastating, quite. So going back to the story, I draw that from the story. I think this idea that it was, your destiny has kind of like a tunnel to it, which is, this is where I'm going. And then suddenly something happens and you go, oh, either the tunnel's not there anymore, or, it's a dead end, or, what should I do? I need to find a new path. And that disorientation between losing one path and trying to find another, is that a pleasant thing or an unpleasant thing, a necessary thing?
Or you work really hard to continue that path. And I think in both the instances that I was speaking about for you two, actually, I think you both knew about it. It just wasn't as relevant, right? And I still got to where I was headed, right? I think for you, David, it was wanting to work in trading. And I think the feedback to you was, well, you don't have the experience. And I thought, I'm going to show him. And sure enough, we continued to work together 4 or 5 more times. And so I think it showed up intangibly for you. I think for you, Helmut, it's when I took the retail job, right? There was nobody else. I was kind of the last person standing, and you were like, okay, let's give it to her. I think the words were different than what I
now
heard.
The truth comes out.
And what, the words I heard was, gosh, they can't find anyone else. And Trisha, I guess we'll give it to you, but that for me was the catalyst I needed to, and that accelerated my career, right? And so even though that's probably not what you meant, or that's what I heard.
That's the way you heard it.
Right. And that accelerated my career to prove I could do a job that I probably wasn't really qualified for. So, in both instances, you two have positively impacted me, probably without even realizing we did it, which is probably why we're talking today, right? I mean, you continue to have an influence on my life.
Actually,
and David, I called you before I took this job, right? I mean, it's relationships in life matter a lot.
That's a good line. Relations matter a lot. Trisha, can we talk a bit about one thing which I'm really interested in? I think we have a bit of time. You work with many young people, and I just had a conversation this morning with another HR person, and the person was complaining how lazy the next generation is, and in particular the HR people in their 20s, they want to work from home or don't want to work at all, and are very entitled. Now, you as a mother, but also as a big boss, how do you relate to the next generation? Because our books are very much to do with generational issues and generational work, and it'd be really interesting if you could share a bit about that dimension in your life.
Yes, happy to. And I think I see both ends of that spectrum. I have seen what you're relating to, or what the other HR person was complaining about, in this huge desire for remote work and working different hours, and maybe different than we were raised, right? You worked harder, not less, and probably enjoyed the work-life balance less in my 20s and 30s than I enjoy now, I would say. But likewise, then I look at my son, and he's working 2 jobs and going to school for engineering full-time and building 3D models for a work study. I mean, he's so loaded. I see me and him and go, man, you keep going. But he also was the one that said, gosh, it'd be fun to remote work occasionally so I could do some other things in the evening. And so I do think you can still have ambition, but also want to work differently. And, I think we're going to have to evolve. I still want to be in the office 5 days a week. I'm still going to be here. I go walk the floor on Friday, and to my dismay, there's 4 people out of 180 that are on the floor. And it's okay. I mean, I don't love it, but it's the way of the world. And I think, I don't think the ambition has changed. I think kids are more entitled just because we give them more now. I really do. I mean, we had so much less, it feels. I also think technology has made it that there's more space for other things because technology makes things a lot easier. I'm excited about the new generation. I mean, every time we get our new batch of interns in, I get excited because there's so much, they can do so much more than I think I could do when I was their age. And so for me, that's exciting. I'm not ready to give up on that group yet. I think well, that's who's going to run the world here in not very long. So I'm not as worried about that maybe as the HR person you talk to.
It's interesting because all of the work that we've been doing in this space makes us wonder how much of this is about generational judgment. This is the way that we work. This is our routine. This is how we've come to accept work takes place in this way.
Right.
And when you really strip it down, the question that I suppose that really remains, but sometimes gets blanketed or it becomes harder to see is, isn't it really about the outcomes? Isn't it really about performance? And when I mean performance, I don't mean sort of the visible display of performance that we caricature in a groundhog career when we talk about Shay doing his formula for success, which is still quite real. The idea that in corporate life you have to be seen to do the right things in order to be successful, when in reality, don't we all agree the substance is really what outcomes you get, what value you create, and to some very large extent, all the rest of it is just, sort of window dressing. Where you do it, I mean, we might have preferences, but we should own them as our own preferences rather than necessarily say that they are essential to curing cancer or, going to Mars or, trying to create value for shareholders.
Totally agree. Totally agree. I think actually that's the one thing that came out of COVID that, I can fly up tomorrow and help my son move to his internship in Chicago this week and still work. I mean, that we could have never fathomed, right? We take vacation before. So for me, it's technology has made it that I can connect anywhere in the world. And I do think it keeps us more connected to our job, better so than we could have 5 years ago even. So I'm a huge fan of it because I feel like I'm able to live my life and do what I want to do and still not be disconnected from work. So the next generation I think it's going to be better to work in that generation, frankly, than what we had. I really do. I wish I was younger.
One career tip to the next generation, Trisha, just one. If you had one tip.
Goodness. This is my number one tip. It's been my number one tip no matter how long I've worked and who I'm talking to. It's pick your boss. I still go back to that. Who you work for matters. We work so long that I just think if you can't look up and respect the person you work for or see what you can learn from them, then you need to move bosses. I've worked for really good ones and not so good ones, and I just think that's what's made the difference, both of you. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be talking to you two if you
We don't want to go down there.
But I do think that matters because it impacted how I became a leader. And I think hopefully impacting the leaders of the future. I'm hopeful that I have a following and they go, yeah, I want to be like her. If you don't want to be like me, maybe that's they need to find a different leader to learn from. But I do think if you can, picking your bosses. I've said that to my kids and they're like, Mom, I just want to get a job. I said, yeah, but someday you'll be able to pick a boss because it makes a difference. It does.
Wonderful. Okay, well, that's a good segment to sort of wrap up. We try and keep these podcasts to around 30 minutes. So let me close by just thanking Trisha for her time today. And look, we always have fun whenever we have conversations. It's lovely to, in a way, find excuses for us to continue to collaborate and work together. But some final words. So let's start with Trisha. Power of stories, careers, next generation, and any final thoughts as we wrap up here about what Helmet and I have been trying to work on this last couple of years is how do you provide useful, relevant, entertaining advice for the next generation of professionals entering the workforce? How do we leave a constructive legacy that helps rather than judges or gets in the way? So anything finally you'd like to share?
I think, first of all, I love what you guys are doing. I did watch your first podcast, and the pants reference was brilliant, by the way. I think you are creating a new genre of books. I guess what I would say is that I think the power of stories is just that, right? It's human stuff that's happening, and it's not in a book. It's not perfect. It's messy, and it's relevant, right? People understand there's a thread to every person's story that you either go, gosh, I get it, I've been through that, or gosh, I hope I don't ever have to go through that. And so I do think most people can relate to nearly every story out there. And so I think keep telling stories, because we're all pretty unique individuals, yet we somehow figure out a way to all kind of keep this world moving. So yeah, keep doing power of stories. I think it's brilliant.
Dr. Schuster.
I just basically want to thank you very much, Trish. When we talk to people in this podcast, we also like to have people which basically are role models for the world. And what I really admire so much about you is your authenticity. I mean, everything you do, say, is 100% Trish Conley. And for that, a big, big thank you. And I'm sure our audience is going to be very, very happy to experience the true Trish Conley. So thank you very much.
Okay, so with that, it's goodbye from me, it's goodbye from him, and it's goodbye from Trisha.